line. Bad bitches, every city in my tribe. Look behind. Booty dominate.
Hello, welcome.
Hello, Kenzie. Good afternoon.
What did you want to talk about?
Well, first of all, thank you for taking the time and the energy to speak up and use your voice and practice conversing with people that you probably don't agree with. Huge credit to you for doing that. A lot of people should follow that lead, in my opinion. I think it's important we have these conversations, so kudos to you for that. Um,
Thank you.
I think that the one I would like to understand your position on is how. Well, actually, you know what? I should apologize. I feel like I should just openly apologize for the third one or the second one. Do men really want to protect women? So, right out of the gate, it's terrible that you even have to ask that question. And it tells me that there's plenty of men who drop the ball on the things that they're supposed to do to uphold their end of the log. And it's just, it's upsetting and it's devastating. And there should be a lot more support. I guess what I want to know, um, would you agree that feminine values and their place, their spot in the workplace, in the community, in all of these things, do you think that we have gained ground on that?
What do you mean by feminine values?
Um, well, it's been what, less than 100 years since we've had your help in the workplace, right? Like since women like exploded onto the workforce, right? The introduction of the birth control pill, the sexual revolution, all of these things, like the liberal movement that took place. It's been has
No, women have always worked, especially Black and immigrant women.
I'm not saying that they haven't worked. That's not the claim. I'm just asking if you think that we've made progress as far as creating more of an equal space.
In some instances, sure, but I disagree with your statement that it's only been 100 years since women have been contributing to the workforce. That's not true.
In the grand scheme of the human race, would you say that it's fair to claim it hasn't been very long?
No,
Why not?
because we've seen that women have always worked. In the early 18th, or I'm sorry, 19th century, a majority of textile and factory workers were women.
Hmm.
Black
Why?
women have always worked. 40% of labor jobs today women hold. Women have had many hands in construction of um, certain US systems as well as contributions technology-wise. So while I would say it's more dominant, sure, but I wouldn't say that the last 100 years encompasses like women's contributions economically or within the workforce.
So, how do you suppose that we wound up in the situation where we live in a world that's, in your claim, predominantly patriarchal? How do you think that we wound up here as a human culture?
I think men have utilized violence to establish and maintain authority.
Would you agree that men are more violent than women?
Not innately, no.
Women do also have the capacity to be violent. I'm just trying to understand your positions.
Okay, I answered your question.
So women do also have the capacity to be violent. What you're saying is not just men.
Yeah.
So I think it's interesting. Would you agree? I guess I'm still trying to understand your entire line of thought and position. I haven't. I just ran into your live yesterday, and I waited quite a bit to speak with you. And I'm still
What
trying to
what
understand.
specifically did you want to discuss?
Specifically, the patriarchy is what I'm interested in. I'm interested in your position on that, and I'm trying to get to the point, right? What like, how do you think we originally got into this? You're telling me that it's because of domination and force. I would argue that the human female raises children, right? Is that not Is it hard to defend yourself if you're pregnant and or watching young children? Is that more difficult to be in a defensive stance?
Against what?
A threat, any threat.
No, I think there are circumstances, sure, but I mean, prior to like humans' understanding of like where babies came from, we lived in a matriarchy because it was thought that women were like gods, because they magically just became pregnant and created human life. And it wasn't until we discovered where babies come from and that not pregnancy happens to women, that it's done to women by men, that shift changed. So
Pregnancy
I think,
is done to women by men. Is that what you said?
yeah, men get women pregnant.
Okay, so women don't participate in that process? Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that prior to how we scientifically knew pregnancy happened, they thought it was just something magical that women did.
Gotcha, gotcha. Okay. Well, I don't think anybody would disagree that that is definitely a magical quality about women. We absolutely value, or at least a real man would absolutely value a woman for that capacity and that ability. I think there's way too many men who don't meet the standard that you guys are looking for. If women do not get the support when they're pregnant that they should, and I think that that's a huge part of this problem. But I really just don't think men are we didn't get together and say, hey, listen, like we should make it so that women are pregnant. It wasn't like our idea that that happens. You know what I mean?
That's not what I claimed. I just said it was thought that a magical thing happened to women where they just became pregnant. And then it was discovered that women aren't like magical beings that just create life, that they have to have sex with men in order to become pregnant. So it's not something that happened to women, it's something that's done to women. And that's when men started to utilize that. And we move from from a matriarchy to a patriarchy, because we can historically see that like men have very much treated women like property when it comes to the family structure, whether that is within marriage, as well as providing children, and why male lineage is revered rather than female lineage.
So, but it
Um,
sounds like you're suggesting that there was some sort of like that we some sort of like conspiration conspired like to like take over like some sort of a powerful spot. Do you really believe that men are conspiring to keep women down? Like, is that a thought process? Is that
I
I'm
mean, I
really trying.
wouldn't jump to that conclusion, but yes, I think historically we can see that men have utilized violence to establish their authority.
That's interesting. Okay. Um, so how do we fix this? What's the solution?
Well, I think that's very multifaceted because there's obviously a lot of moving parts, and I think it's deconstructing a lot of systems and social constructions that we have. So I would say deconstructing the patriarchy, colonialism, and white supremacy, moving away from capitalism, and essentially engaging in in a more cooperative society. Um, where we provide the basic needs for everyone with the aims of trying to free people from labor, um, and allow the freedom for people to express themselves without receiving violence based on certain qualities of their identity.
You said white supremacy. That's
Yeah,
interesting. You're a professional woman, I assume.
yeah.
Do you hold a administrative position? I'm just curious. What is your position professionally?
I'm in sales.
So, as a professional person in sales, why don't you subjugate your position to somebody of an ethnic background because of your white privilege?
I don't know what you mean by that question. What do you mean subjugate?
You mentioned white privilege.
I
You're a white
mentioned
woman.
white supremacy.
Oh, white supremacy. Well,
Yeah,
you're still in a position of authority, and you're a white woman. So why wouldn't you allow
I'm in a
someone of
position of privilege. Sure, as a white woman, yes.
so why wouldn't you just allow someone of an ethnic background to step forward?
In what capacity?
your position in your professional life? Why would you
Well,
maintain that? 'Cause it sounds to
I'm
me like
in sales,
it
and
sounds to me like you're
my
taking advantage of
position
the
is
same
not.
system.
How is me being employed in sales taking advantage?
Because you're working in a capitalist country. You're a white woman who's in an authoritative position. I feel like you're flourishing just fine under the same patriarchy that you claim destroys you.
Right. So you're correct. I do have a lot of privilege. I have privilege in the fact that I am able-bodied. I have privilege in the fact that I am educated. I have privilege in the fact that I'm white. The only place I really don't have privilege is that I'm a woman. And so even though the system is beneficial for me in a lot of capacities, I recognize that it's not beneficial for people in other capacities. And I
So
don't
you're
think
asking for people to
I don't know
understand that.
why handing my like job that's not like a W-2 and something that you apply for would diminish white supremacy. I think we need to understand whiteness and its constructions around that, which is why I do talk a lot about feminism from an intersectional lens and even standards of beauty that women have. But I think your questioning and your position is kind of bad faith.
Sorry you feel that way. It's definitely not. I'm trying to understand your line of thought, but you're trying to
It's not an
deconstruct the base.
apology.
Wait, so do you think that like white supremacy will be ended by white people just giving up their jobs to black people?
I think that people who make those claims should absolutely allow themselves to step back and have somebody step forward.
Do you
Well,
think it
I
will
don't
get rid
understand
of
why they
white
would do
supremacy?
that again.
Do you think it would get rid of white supremacy? Was my question.
Well, if there's no white people in authoritative positions, then who's the supreme person?
Do you think white people giving up their jobs to black people would end white supremacy? Yes or no? It's a yes or no question.
Yes, that's what I'm suggesting. Why wouldn't the white people step down if they're the ones who are bringing this forward, right? If I'm a white person in an authoritative position and I'm saying, well, other people should have a chance to be leaders, right? Then how come I don't step back?
Yeah. So you thinking that giving jobs to black people, like white people giving up their jobs to black people, would end white supremacy shows that you don't have the education in this subject to even talk about white supremacy. So maybe you should be asking, like, well, how does white supremacy contribute to this patriarchal violence? Rather than just saying something absolutely ridiculous. Because the idea that like white people giving up their jobs to black people would end white supremacy would just it's actually super ridiculous. I'm sorry. Um, it's just like a bad faith point. It is exactly why Kenzie said it would be disingenuous because all it would do is create like a hatred system towards like black people and cause like white backlash because the issue isn't just jobs. The issue is the entire systems that we live underneath, as well as the ways that these systems are implemented. So capitalism as a whole being racist, rather than it just being like, oh, a white person has a job over a black person. It's about like hiring structures in general. It's about
How
like
do
treating
we
people in the job in general.
how do we disengage these institutions? Does it not start at a personal level?
Sure, it can start at a personal level. Like if you want to just say like, oh, if everyone just stops doing X, Y, or Z, then everything will stop. But like matter of factly, it wouldn't. This includes like material reality, right? So like if you gave your job to a black person, would it end white supremacy in your job?
If there was black people looking for a position, sure. Why I don't understand why it wouldn't. Why wouldn't it?
Yeah, the fact that you would think that it would end white supremacy in your job and those black people still wouldn't get treated a certain way shows that you don't have enough education in that subject.
So I work with the dispossessed. I'm a music instructor at a jail. I work with people who are largely from ethnic background and institutionalized. So to claim that someone doesn't have education is a very easy kind of wave a hand to be like, oh, you're not educated. Go learn what you need to learn. I
Okay,
understand.
cool.
I'm trying to
Define
understand
structural
both your
racism.
line of thought. in
Define
her line of thought. So it's not. This is a conversation, right? So you're not
absolutely.
concretely
Define
correct, and
structural
neither am I.
racism. Define structural racism at this moment.
Structural racism.
Yes, define
Define
structural.
structural racism. Um, I think that we focus way too much on the problem
Exactly. You
than
don't know. You don't
the
know, so you
solution.
don't have enough education in this
I don't
subject.
remember
My point
claiming
was
that I
being
did know,
premise.
Sean. When did I say to you I understand structural racism? Did I ever make
Because
that
when I
claim?
said you
So
don't have
you're
enough
telling
education in this
me
subject, like when
you're
I
telling
said you
me to
don't,
give up my sales job in order to end white
You
supremacy, which
you
is
were
what you just
talking.
realistically.
You're suggesting that there's white supremacy.
yeah,
And that
there
the
is white
patriarchy
supremacy.
has.
The issue is that,
So
like, let's not pivot here. The issue is that you said you had enough education within this subject to speak on this subject. I asked
I
you
don't
a
remember
very
saying that.
fucking basic question about this subject. Sorry, Kenzie, I'll stop cursing. I asked you a very
I don't
basic
understand why
subject,
you're
like a
upset.
very basic thing on this subject, because you're saying something that doesn't make any sense, and you're trying to gaslight me into saying like you're just doing Darvo. And so now I'm getting upset because you're doing Darvo. And like the issue is that like I've never attacked you. I just said that what you're saying shows that you don't have education in this subject to speak on it. And then you said, well, just to say that I don't have education on this subject is a good way to get out of talking about the subject. And I go, okay, cool.
It's a
Let me
good way to
test your
dismiss someone
education.
who you're
Let me
talking with.
test let me test your education on the subject, and you failed miserably at like a 101 thing. Like if I asked Kenzie to define structural racism, Kenzie could do it right now. But the fact that you could not
And
define
both of
structural
you are
racism means
and
that you
both of
don't know
you are
what structural
participating.
racism is. And if you don't know what structural racism is, you can't possibly know what white supremacy is. And if you don't know what white supremacy is, you can't possibly know how to fix it. Like,
I think that you're super focusing on issues than solutions, my man. And I don't remember claiming to have any level of education on the
you
subject. I'm
said
just
it.
having a
Please
conversation
stop
and trying to
gaslighting me.
understand your
You're the
positions.
one who said you had the education. You said you worked with the dispossessed, and me telling you that you didn't have education was disingenuous. Like, that's what you said. And when I tested your knowledge on it and you failed the test, now you're saying, well, I never said that I had education. Now you're just gaslighting on purpose. Stop it.
Sean, what do you do? What is your background, if I might ask?
I'm blackety black black.
Okay, that's not a background. That's
It
your
is.
ethics.
My job is being black. I'm black as fuck. I do black things. I'm blackety black black. What's your
So are
point?
white people allowed to have an opinion on those things?
No.
Okay, so that just dismantled your entire argument. Thank you for
No,
participating.
it doesn't. You can't even define structural racism, nigga. What do you
I'm a
mean that
white
I
person.
like what
How,
are you
how can I
talking
how
about?
can I define what how can I define what you just told me I'm not qualified to talk about?
You're not qualified to talk about me being black. You
Does
asked
not
me if white
racism
people
have
can
to
have
do
an
with people
opinion
being
on me
white or
being
black?
black. Like what are you even talking about?
Does racism have to do with people being white or black? Is that fair to say?
Sure.
You just told me that if I'm not black that I can't have a comment on the conversation. So
You can't
you're,
have a
you're
comment on me being black. You asked me if any white person can have a comment on me being black, and I said no, they cannot. Like, what are you talking about?
talking about racism, which has to do with black and white people, right? So I'm asking you if I'm not allowed to have an opinion on that. You know what I mean? Like we gotta lighten up a little bit and have conversations with people we disagree with. That's where you're gonna find more common ground. And I think that the more we do that, the more that we
You can't
exercise our
have
right,
a
like what you guys are doing. To your credit.
I
Kenzie.
don't want to
Kenzie's a
have common ground with someone who is
yeah.
bigoted.
Right. There's no common ground here. You don't even have enough
Okay.
education on the subject to
Did you
speak
ever,
on racism. That's the issue.
look
Like
at
you don't
the
have enough
actual
education on the
definition?
subject.
I do
Did
kind
you-
of want to start steering the conversation back on track.
Sure.
Um, what was your overall point with that, JW? Like, because if you realize that like white people give their jobs to black people, that you're just kind of rearranging the structural hierarchies, and that there will still be other structures outside of the workforce where black people experience racism, right?
Or different people in the places of power that you're talking about, right? And I'm also suggesting that you guys are benefiting from what you're saying is a bad thing. Both of you seem to be doing just fine. You sound like you're educated.
That's
You're
a bad
well.
argument. That's a bad
How is that
argument.
about? You're telling me that the
Because like
patriarchy harms everyone.
literally slave owners made the argument that slaves lived better lives because
Do
of
we have
slavery.
slaves today? Is this a slavery world that we live in right now? In our
Yes,
Western world?
slavery
Oh,
still exists within America. Yes.
I'm sorry you feel that way. That's interesting.
That's not a feeling. That's from our Constitution. The 13th Amendment allows slavery. What?
So you have a
And
home.
you saying like, can you stop
Like you
saying I'm
have
sorry you feel that way? Number one, it's very patronizing. And number two, that's not an apology.
I'm trying to give honor to the way you feel. I'm sorry, that's disappointing, but
No,
you're
you're
clearly
not.
doing
You're
good
being
things.
patronizing. Because when I make statements and I make claims, you reduce them down to my feelings. That is not a feeling. That is a fact.
I just don't see that people are under slavery today as the
Have you read
person
the
who
13th
under slavery.
Amendment?
Yeah, anyway, listen, you still appear to be doing quite well in this terrible patriarchy that's
Hey,
holding you.
have you
Looks like
read
you
the
have
13th Amendment?
looks like you have a job and a career and you're pretty smart and educated. And all that came from this terrible patriarchy that's dismantling a society. So thank you for
Yeah,
having the time to talk to
I've
me.
also experienced sexual
No,
violence.
so have
So
I.
are you
What's your
saying
point?
I should have to deal with a little bit of sexual violence so that I
I've
can
dealt
have
with sexual violence
education
too.
and a job?
Uh-huh. Okay. I was raped as a boy. So what's your point? I've also been through sexual violence.
Don't tell me that because there are benefits to the system because of my
Mhm.
privilege of certain aspects of my identity,
Mhm.
that somehow overall this system is good. I already made this argument to you that I am a very privileged person, and
Mhm.
yet I still experience biases and disadvantages. And I can also recognize that other people experience them at 10th, 12th, 11th degrees. Women experience violence within this system, especially from men. At,
But it all comes from a position of power. You're suggesting that people in power need to be replaced, and the only solution to that
that
suggestion is
is
to put
not what I
women
suggest at
in
all.
power.
I did not make that claim whatsoever.
Okay. That's what it suggests, though. That's what it
You
sounds like.
made that claim. No, you're just
I
making
am. I am.
assumptions.
Yep. Yeah. Based on your argument. Yeah. So, because if you're
No,
taking
if you
these,
would, no, do not make assumptions. If you want to know my argument, listen to what I'm saying. I am anti-capitalist.
okay.
Why would it be a
So why do
part?
you live in a capitalist country? Why don't
I
you move to
decided
Vietnam? They're
that
doing great.
the entire world is capitalist. And I don't think that just because you live in a society that has structures that you don't think benefit people, that you just leave. It would be like saying like, oh, my house has a broken pipe. Might as well move rather than fixing the pipe.
So I'm not sure that the communistic countries would accept you as a dominant white patriarchal woman.
That's not an argument.
Just they wouldn't. If you went to Vietnam and tried to live in that communist country, they would definitely not
They're not
accept you.
communist. Like
No,
I already said, every economy in the globe is capitalist.
all right. Well, listen, again, thank you for taking the time to talk with someone you disagree with. I think that there's a lot of value in that. Sean, best of luck to you guys.
I'm taking your mic away. You don't need a microphone.
I'm so fucking cute, bitch.